Amardeep, we spoke last year about your books on the Sikh heritage, and we talked about how you're creating a presence by writing those stories, because every time we write a story, that document has a power, and that document creates an impact. So let's just start by going to where we left off last year in talking about your books and how you believe that their presence is making an impact.
Yeah, so I think it will be good to bridge in this with a refresher as to what is it that one has done, and then we can get down to as to what the impact has been. So having spent about 25 years in a structured environment, which is a corporate, I think, I do thank the powers that you've given me this opportunity to delve into the creative space. And this creative space has enabled me in the last 6 years, where I've dedicated my life in an absolutely an unstructured manner, stumbling upon certain paths and believing passionately about it, that these need to be documented for posterity. And these projects are not being led by any organizational vision. They're just something that you deeply believe in. None of such projects actually can, I think, the ones which we have done, which I talk about, can be done by an individual alone. So of course, there are many powers behind it, many supporters who emerge while you are on this path, but essentially it's your vision, and essentially it's your desire to document for posterity. And as a part of that, when in 2014 I left American Express at the regional head level for revenue management for the cards business, this question in my mind as to the Sikh community, which was equally impacted as Hindus and Muslims and Jains in the partition of 1947 when the British left the Indian subcontinent. How come when we look at their current generation, people cannot think more than a few functional religious places, an entire legacy reduced to the realm of religion because of a political event which happened at the time the British were leaving the subcontinent. Now, that doesn't make sense, because when communities and when people are living in certain regions, they are not just engaged in spiritual aspects, they're engaged in multifaceted things. I mean, there was a Sikh empire which is commonly known as the Lahore Darbar, which British annexed as the last empire in what finally became the British India. This was the Punjab, the Lahore Darbar, which was also known by the British as Sikh Kingdom. So one is compelled to think that so much written in the books, and the British write that they fought the toughest of the two Anglo-Sikh wars in the conquest of Punjab and across all the conquests that they made in what became British India. So the question is that there's much been written in the history books about art, architecture, philosophy, culture, martial aspects, the forts, how the empire expanded, how the communities lived or intertwined with various belief systems of Sufism, Monism, the Hindu aspects, the Sikh aspects. Where has all that vanished? It's not vanished, really. It's really our umbilical cord has been severed. And of course, in 7 decades, when communities have ceased to live in those lands, you are not able to write your narratives because the narrative is not evolving there. The narrative now is evolving in the Sikh community outside of the region where they carved their history for more than 1,000 years. So I went into Pakistan with a simple quest to understand for myself before I changed the jobs, and essentially look at those strands of the remnants of both tangible and the intangible aspects. And when I came back, something within me compelled me to look at this aspect, that why has this energy shown it to you? Why has this energy not has helped you in overcoming all kinds of barriers in going into these places? Because even if people want, they are afraid of getting into the country. They're afraid of going beyond certain areas. They're afraid of going into areas where there is reported trouble. And yet you found that you've been able to smoothly navigate through them. So I felt strongly and I wrote the first book, which was known as Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan. The journey did not stop there. It was a void that I had kind of, in the year 2015 end when it got published, I think I had catered to a void because a visual ethnographic representation of the past is a very different way of representing facts of history and culture, which can actually be quite boring in the academic environment. It only needs seasoned minds to delve into them. And here you were trying to now reach to the masses through visual ethnographic imprints. And that then led to many talks around the world. And then when I was invited into Pakistan, I went back for one of the talks up there in Islamabad. And rest I know is that suddenly the gates started opening for certain areas, which in my making of the first book, I was not able to get in. And most of these are the forts of the Sikh era, which are with the army, and getting inside them is next to impossible. And when that started happening, I went in for 5 days and I followed my heart and I stayed there for more than 60 days, of which 55 went into the field work. And what I came back was a much larger documentation, which I did in the form of the second book called The Quest Continues, Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan. And then just to bring this to an end, books are one medium where you realize that they are the foundations. They're the foundations for two reasons. One, it helps you understand the subject because you are also ignorant. You read history books, you've not seen it. So it allows a bridging of the two things. So one is the books, while are 1,000 pages and there's a lot of documentation, I see them as having been my walking stick to help me understand the subject better, right? That's number one. The number two aspect is that the books, all what we might say, are still the best media to create an aura around an author, to suddenly give the credentials, because I was coming from a corporate world. I'd never written a book. And that credential and that aura or that wow factor, that the moment which the books create when someone flips the pages and sees the content inside, goes, wow, this is a lot of labor that's gone into it, right? And it's happened very rapidly. It allows the openings of doors for the other pursuits. And this is where I'll just make one additional contribution that happened, and then we'll stop there to take on your next question. But as a part of that, I was able to get some footage from video footage from certain segments, which is just about less than 5% of the contents of my two books, which I was able to stitch together into two documentaries called Peering Soul, which basically is making a statement that, hey, look, I'm going to take you into a journey into the remote areas of Pakistan, not into the traditional religious sites of the Sikh community, which the entire community is focused on right now. And I'm going to refresh your narrative to make you think that, wow, this was a huge legacy that just vanished from the memories of people, right? And the second one is the documentary called Peering Warrior, which is a journey of my quest into the forts of the Sikh era, from River Indus up till the Afghanistan border in Pakistan. And most of them are inaccessible forts because they were the Pakistan Army. I was able to go inside them. I documented them. So these two books, these two documentaries, Peering Soul and Peering Warrior, are now up on the YouTube, and they allow to arouse the curiosity of the viewer now to get interested to delve into the deeper subject of the two books. I'm going to stop here with respect to Pakistan because as much has developed thereafter, which has taken us on a different paths altogether as to the emerging tentacles of these works that you do. But those are my first works, right?
Right. You've highlighted a couple of characteristics of creativity. One is passion, the other one is courage. So your presence in, taking this journey, this voyage into the unknown, was accompanied by your passion because you had a deep personal interest in what you were trying to discover, and also the courage. Courage also has a force of its own, and doors open to you because you were there with that that rich combination of both passion and the courage, which it kind of, you knock on doors and they open because they can feel that presence, that strong presence. What do you would you say that I'm accurate in in suggesting that?
Well, you see, you're absolutely right. When we were in the corporate world, as I said earlier, that I consider myself fortunate that in this lifetime, some force has given me an opportunity uh, to basically spend 25 years of my career in a very structured environment, and now it's in an unstructured environment. Now, one of the things that I studied in which was reinforced because I was at a senior level at American Express, and we used to get taught these corporate skills, and we used to cascade it to our teams. But one of the things that was taught to us in the corporate world, which I take as a cue, but I actually really feel it comes into life in the unstructured environment, which I'm leading right now in the creative space. But creativity lies in everything. Creativity lies in a structure as well as unstructured. Certain elements get amplified in the unstructured environment. And what are those? But there are certain baselines don't change. One is, you talked about courage. What is courage? The underlying factor of a courage. The underlying factor to me is the ability to take risk, right? And when you are moving out of your comfort zone, that's the risk-taking ability for which in the corporate world, in the yearly matrix, you get measured for one of the parameters, which is your risk-taking ability. Now, I've had my performance appraisals every year, but it's a very structured performance appraisal. That risk-taking ability is, are you going out of your comfort zone and trying to do something more to create something that becomes a seeding of another thought within the organization? That's one. Or if you go into a financial industry, are you taking risk of some investments which are out of the box and which bring about certain dollar returns? But everything in the corporate world is based on dollars, right? Now, you suddenly move on from there in terms of the unstructured environment, which I'm leading for last 6 years, which is in the creative space of going and doing field research. And the way I define, so there's always in the corporate world, I think what I learned is that don't dilute yourself. Don't dilute yourself. Focus on your core competency. Pick up your 1 or 2 core competencies and build upon that, and then leverage assets around you to achieve the bigger goals. In the creative space, both the skills are the same. Risk-taking ability, suddenly in the space that I am actually focusing on, is the key criteria to bring about any understanding, any learning, any new product creation. But the key out here is, what's your core competency? Because core competency is going to define in the creative space what's your element of risk taking that you're going to do. So in my case, I very quickly understood that for years that I was in the corporate world, I was also doing something on the side to develop my internal pursuits. And those were reading history, reading delving into spirituality, philosophy, arts, photography. But an outcome of that was I was making these out-of-the-box circuits into places in my holidays where others would traditionally not go. They would like to go to a beach resort in a corporate world, chill it out on a beach, chill it out on a holiday home, and so on and so forth. We would make trips to up in the hills, Tibet, and so on and so forth, out of the comfort zone. Now, those were calculated risks that you're going and enjoying something at high altitudes and so on and so forth. But once you got into the creative space, the core competency soon I have developed, which has been only strengthened in the last 6 years, is, as I define, is going into the areas where others are choosing not to go, and there finding the remnants of tangible and intangible parts of your community's legacy to document for the future. That's the core competency. And the key underline out here is going into the places where others are choosing not to go. Now, that's the risk-taking ability, because others have developed a fear factor or a comfort zone, which is not permitting them to go into those zones. Now, at the grassroots, in the 6 years, what I've learned, that the fear has to be dropped. And when you drop your fear, you realize everyone is a human. Everyone is a human. And humans want to interact. Humans want to live together. Humans want to engage. The narratives, the political narratives, have created such situations in certain political geographies that the fear factor gets amplified and compounded and creates a shell around the person to not delve into those paths, right? But if I would say in the project that we'll talk later on, that where me and my wife have dedicated 2 years now, we've even pushed the boundaries even further, and we'll get into that later on. But we've gone to 9 countries, of which 5 of them are really no-go zones, right, for common people. But right now, in the early stage, when I'm talking about the Pakistan domain, most of the people would not want to go into Sindh or Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Baltistan in the Kashmir area because of the turmoils that are there. And you just walk inside, so you break your comfort zone and you go inside, and then you start finding people are engaging, people want you to be there, people are hungry for love, right? So unless you take the first step of risk, you don't understand what's the beautiful potential that lies there to be unfurled. And as I always, many times I say this, is that as you think, so you attract. And in my case, I think, yes, the risk-taking ability, what I learned in the corporate world, was the first step. But the thought within me was the desire, the passion to delve into certain areas and really know the people, know the history, know the past, where these elements are lying. And all I can say is I only received love, right, from people, which allowed me to complete these pursuits. Just to bring this to an end. So one is, once you decide that you're going to take the risk, presence becomes very important in the moment. And it's important in these pursuits, the presence has to be looked into it. As I say always, that these journeys potentially will not repeat in your life. They are once in a lifetime opportunity.
So,
and in some ways,
carry on. I thought you'd finished.
Sorry?
Carry on. I thought you'd finished.
Yeah. They're once in a lifetime opportunity, and once in a lifetime opportunities, basically, you have to be present in the moment. You cannot have, your skills have to be absolutely at the peak. So for instance, I'm a visual ethnographer now. If I pick up my camera, my mind is looking at history, which is already embedded inside. My mind is already anchored into the spirituality aspect. My mind is already working on the oneness aspect. My mind is trying to find something outside the box, but visual documentation is the key out here. You are not there with a luxury like a traveler who's going to make notes and who's going to make various annotate things and what you've observed here and there. You don't have the time. You're getting in, your camera better click something in that moment and better do it fast and have your tentacles on to observe the environment, take the essence out of it. There's no time to write it down. You just walk away, and when you get back in the evening at your hotel, again, there is no time to write because you've got batteries to charge up, you've got backups to do, you're clicking at a very rapid pace. Technology allows you a lot of things, but technology also demands a lot of back-end work. And therefore, the storage inside your mind has to be in layers. And that skill is very important. And that requires presence at every moment to connect the dots. And when you come back and you start writing it, imagine their months have passed by. And then all that from your memory has to emerge. So if you're not going to be present in the moment, somewhere deep down inside your brain cells, these will not be imprinted and therefore for permanent imprint, which you can extract. The last thing I want to talk about is the passion element. None of the pursuits in life, whether it be your corporate, whether it be your business, or whether it be such creative pursuits, can succeed if you're not passionate. My sense is when you're working for someone, you can demonstrate passion, but many a times you will have a feeling within you that you don't own that passion because you are working for someone. When you work for yourself and when you work for something that you believe, the passion and the belief gets aligned, and that has a multiplying exponential factor. Where I often say is that to the youth, don't follow your passion. And I'm making a contradictory statement. Don't follow your passion, create your passion. And there's a very important difference between following your passion, which is a blind following. You could become a photographer and just go around clicking everything here and there. But if you start creating that passion, then all the skills that you have embedded inside you, they will come into a multi-functional machinery that will create your outputs, the products that you will create, which the world needs in a structured manner. You're walking in an unstructured path, and when you come back, all those thoughts, experiences, photographs, in the moment, which were created with a lot of passion because you were creating passions, will get documented, a product gets created, and this is where an unstructured pursuit takes the shape of a structure. And that structured product is where your presence of creating it will result in a new pursuit that will emerge right from behind you. And this is how the journey of creativity continues. You can't think about what's your next pursuit. You can't project into what's your next pursuit. Unlike the goals and the targets and the corporate world we try and strive towards, the creative pursuits are always very short bursts of energy. And each burst, if performed with creating the passions and absolutely with 100% presence, will result in the emergence of a new pursuit. And the question really is, how long do you have the energy to continue on these paths? That's the ambiguity.
And when we leave school, I think a lot of us get taught that when we're applying for jobs, we need to mention at least 3 hobbies. At least I was taught that. And I think you've reminded me of the importance of our hobbies, because for many of us, it's through our hobbies that we express our deepest creativity, because that is what we really love. You know, we're not doing it for commercial gain. We're doing it simply because we love that, whether it's playing football, whether it's drawing, whether it's traveling, or, you know, as yourself, like writing books. For some people, that is their hobby rather than something that they want to do for commercial benefits. You know, they might engage in writing long journals, and that helps them, that creativity helps them to do their work in the corporate environment to a better level.
Yeah, I think neither side, the creative aspect is indispensable. I mean, the more a person has been feeding it, the more you get better in the outputs that you give to the world in the form of a structured environment, and of course the skills that are taught in the corporate environment. For instance, the project that we are doing right now, it's a massive project. I don't think I would have ever succeeded with just my creativity. We've not talked about that right now, but this project, we wouldn't have actually succeeded if it was just the creative aspect. It requires a strong element of creativity. But when the projects become larger and bigger, they also require structured capabilities, financial aspects, influencing skills. You require basically navigating through challenges, leadership skills, moment that you're there, how to capitalize the maximum out of it. And the two, when they start feeding in together, that's where the power of your subconscious emerges in multiple facets, right? And I think world is, I mean, it can at times surprise you how much can an individual, even with just a thought, achieve when you look back and look at your linear phases of your life and look back and say, wow, this is an amalgamation of two sides of structure and unstructured.
And there must have been times in the early days for you when you had to make that decision about, like, is this a hobby that I'm pursuing, or is this going to be something that I can earn a livelihood from? Especially when there was more than yourself involved. You know, you have a team of people working together with you. So there must have been a point where you had to make that decision about whether it was going to be more than simply a hobby.
So my experience is that it's not as simple as a severing of the umbilical cord to say that I'm going to stop this, I'm going to pursue that. And I'll say that I'm glad it's not been so simple, because if it were simple, you know what it means is that you are suggesting that from a structured environment, you will suddenly transition into a 100% unstructured environment overnight. If it was to happen, they say that change is the biggest challenge for any human being. Now imagine a change, which is sometimes you just change a city. You just change your homes and people go through a lot of emotional issues, right? And they find it very hard to manage themselves, right? Now imagine you're going to be changing your entire focus from a structured environment to an unstructured creative environment overnight. Imagine the amount of change that will be there. I don't think the human mind can manage it very easily. And you will fail. I think so. So
Family,
never
yeah,
should
and
one.
families can't manage it. Maybe one individual could, but their loved ones can't keep up with that sudden change.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes I think that such dramatic changes uh, will be a stepping stone for failure. So how should the change happen? At least I can say in my own journey that change should be not forced upon oneself. As you rightly said, when you apply for a job in your early days, people tend to look for what the person has done beyond the 9 to 5 or what we are hiring the person for, right? Because that shows those ingredients of passion, right? Whether they are there or not, whether how that uh, can be nurtured for the benefit of the job is left for the environment to figure out. But when you're going through that 9 to 5 structure, I think the key is, in my case, it has taken me 30 years from the age of 17 years when I was doing my engineering degree to be doing something on the side, delving into pursuits which were on the side. And I found that one thing has led me to the other, to the other, to the other. In the early days, again, this is about presence and passion. I was very passionate about history of my community, and I was delving into that. In a few years, I had maxed it out. And then I suddenly found my next purpose emerged from there because there were certain questions embedded within it from the history that you had studied that pointed me towards uh, another facet, which was my community's spiritual scriptures and understanding the spirituality out of it, right? So I navigated into that. A few years I delved into that, and it posed many questions on the broader Indic philosophy, which I could not find as an answer within my own community. And we come from the Indic culture. So that pushed me towards the Indic philosophy. And I've studied Western philosophy out of interest, but it's never kind of excited me because I find it's devoid of certain energy which is inherent in the Indic philosophy about a space for energy which some call as the creator or some call as God or whatever it be. But Western philosophy is devoid of that. It's moral, ethics, and so on and so forth. But here in the Indic philosophy, the two are intertwined. And from spirituality emerges those questions. And from there was a time I got disillusioned. And I say in the creative space, disillusionment is an important step of change in phase, and you should encourage disillusionment because it forces you to ask yourself the path that you've been traversing, is it the right path or needs a correction, right? And that when it happened, it made me realize, what am I trying to find in this pursuit for solace? And I got answers from spirituality in the Indic philosophy, like the creator is in the creation, creation is the creator. And when that was realized, I picked up photography and I went down that path. When I went down that path of photography, the next question that emerged for me was that, why am I seeing so many photographers? My photography had reached a certain worldly recognition level. But what I found is photographers are seldom able to express the emotions behind those pictures. They can write one or two captions, but they can't write the entire experience around it, right? There are very few can do it. So that kind of navigated me towards writing. Now, when that happened, it became who I was, and all this was happening while I was in the corporate world, right? So all I'm trying to say to answer your question is, change has taken me good 30 years to come to a point, or 25 years till I left my corporate world, to come to a point where all the skills were prepared. And when I walked out, I went through a major amount of upheaval. It was again like when I was doing my personal pursuits. As I said, I was disillusioned at a particular point of time. When I left American Express, so because of certain environments that were created in the corporate world, and I was at my highest of my ego point, which is required in the higher levels of corporate world to succeed. And I thought I will just pick up another job. But that's where the creative element comes in, where the divine has a purpose invested for you, and that starts manifesting. and you are put onto a path of just going and experiencing something. And that's where the purpose emerges, and you realize, I have been earning for 25 years. Can I just not step back for 1 year or so and say that, let me write it down because no one has done it. Why has this energy shown this to me? And that's where you take charge of it. And when you take charge of it, it starts manifesting into a purposeful dimension. And this is where what you were saying as how do you know what your next purpose is going to be, and how do you test for it at every stage when you're doing these various personality trait developments. You got to look at, you got to try many things. You got to try. This is a 30-year journey in which I've tried many things, but at every step when I'm trying, I'm looking for acceptance signals. Acceptance signals start from within, and those acceptance signals, then when I was writing for magazines and others, are people finding these stories interesting? Are people connecting with it? You've not created an avalanche, but you are testing. And these test points, if they resonate with you and if they resonate with the audience outside, is an acceptance signal which says, there is a path ahead. Now that path, when you leave the corporate world, in my case, suddenly the paycheck stops. And the biggest challenge that you have to manage is, how do you now make this as a living purpose of your life? Because you cannot do any creative pursuits if you're not actually able to put the food on the table. And therefore, you have to be financially intelligent in the sense that your investments should be in the right direction, because creative space requires a lot of giving up. Yourself has to be given up. And at some point, the recognition will emerge if you're doing the right thing. But your food on the table, if it is not there, because of all your investments that have been made, you're bringing down your luxurious living to basic living. I don't think you can be successful in the creative. So it's a journey. I don't know if it makes sense there.
Right. And yeah, and for that journey to be sustainable, we need to be willing to accept the feedback. A lot of creatives, what they're creating has to remain a hobby. They're not able to commercialize it. They're not able to sell their creativity because they're not willing to receive the feedback and take that on board in terms of reframing, recreating what they need to, if they want to put food on their table with that thing. Otherwise, if it's a hobby, they don't need to take account of feedback because they're just simply doing it for their own selves.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other thing that you mentioned several times about spirituality, and we share, we're both Sikhs, so when you talk about oneness, I know exactly where you're coming from in terms of our teachings and seeing the world, the universe in its whole oneness. And you wear a turban that in itself creates a presence that when we see you, it's clear that you are a Sikh. So you are, there's an emergence from that presence where your identity is visible rather than myself. My identity is not as visible as it is for yourself because you're dressed as a Sikh, whereas I'm not always dressed as a Sikh. So, and some of the places that you've traveled through your journeys, it's been very dangerous, I imagine, to be a Sikh, because that was not, you were treading on, maybe hostile territory where being a Sikh, it took courage to be wearing a Sikh, perhaps, wearing a turban. So in what way did your presence as a Sikh, as a visible Sikh, in what way did that have an impact?
So there are certain things internally you have to accept and be firm on certain principles that you develop for yourself before you can actually start pushing yourself in this creative space. And one of the principles I made for myself is that it's my question. So I naturally, organically grew into all this, right? And when I organically grew into my first books, explorations, I was very clear. I'm not going to go in with a compromise on my identity because I'm trying to rediscover my roots. And if I'm going to give up my roots, then how do I answer to myself that who I am and what am I trying to discover? So I was very much clear that there should be no gap in my internal and the external pursuit. So therefore, no compromise on my identity. It's a very clear principle. I mean, I could leave my hair loose. I can open my beard and flow it down. I can disguise myself very clearly as one of the people amongst the many. I might just have a longer hair, but I can disguise myself. I chose not to. Now, I'm glad I chose not to, because when I sleep very peacefully in the night, because I know I've done it for who I am. Yeah. But what happens is when you take a decision like that, and the core competency that I defined for my pursuits in the last 6 years, which is basically working in the areas where others are choosing not to go, you are going to be creating potentially more risks for yourself, because you're visible, you're out of the box. Till 72 years back, in the lands of the Indus, my forefathers in this identity were walking freely. They were part of the society. Today, you being a sole person raises eyebrows. So I went in with this acceptance that I will not compromise, so my risk quadruples. But the greater the risk, even 10 times that risk is the opportunities. And that's where I think it's as you think, so you attract. My thinking was right. I did not have the fear factor. And I always think in creative space, if you got a fear factor, you will demonstrate fear. Your words will stutter. Your body language will emanate that. But when you are who you are and you've actually overcome the internal fear and you've accepted it, you start emanating a certain energy which the others absorb. And then your uniqueness becomes an asset for them to engage with you. So you have to transform a risk into an opportunity. And this is something that you learn in the corporate world in terms of dollar and cents returns. But here's an intangible return, which actually is the same skill set. It's saying that I will take the risk, but I will transform that risk into opportunities, because I will allow people to embrace me, right? Because I will emanate that same energy. So to me, that's been the key learning out here. This could be a good segue that after the Pakistan works, we have gone on a massive project in the last 1.5 years, me and my wife. So now my wife has always been a great supporter behind. My books have been edited by her. She and my daughters have given me a lot of support in actually having the flexibility to pursue these paths. But we started a new project last year in January, where we actually are mapping the travels of Guru Nanak, because he has traveled close to in fact, I would say more than what Alexander would have traveled. And there are documentaries, there are books, there's so much on Alexander in the Western world. And then there are Genghis Khan, Marco Polo, and the list goes on. And I always say, what did these people travel for? They all traveled for their personal gains. They traveled for wealth, territory, and expanding empires, killing people. And here's a man who traveled for the oneness of mankind to the spiritual places across 9 countries where congregations would happen, where people would come together, and his whole purpose was to engage with them and have a spiritual dialogue to convey the message of oneness, right? And he took his journeys across 9 countries. And if I was to name that, they're deep down in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Tibet in China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India, 9 countries. So the question that we actually then posed to ourselves after the first 2 books and the 2 documentaries in Pakistan domain is that why hasn't anyone made a documentation of his entire journey in the contemporary times, something like what BBC has done by going into retracing of Alexander's path, right? Why hasn't anyone done this? And Nanak was there as the first Sikh Guru just 550 years back. And if his message was oneness of mankind, then why isn't that he has deserved an attention of the world? And that's where it dawned on it. It goes back to the risk-taking ability. It dawned on us that actually if you take these 9 countries, the task is very complicated. if you want to go really deep down and replicate the entire journey that he has made to all the spiritual sites, which are documented in our traditions, then what you will realize is 70% of the area is inaccessible today because they are war zones, because there are sovereign nation restrictions on your travel, because things have finished off. The history has been eradicated, and yet you've got to go and find in those ruins energy. How would you do that, right? So 70% of the footprint is inaccessible, and that's the inaccessibility which compounds the risk level from a one country work which was done in the two books now to multiple countries, a much more complicated aspect. How would you get the visas? How will you go inside and film? What are the challenges that you come across? These are like places where there's a war going on. I mean, we've had experiences which I don't really talk much about, but near-death experiences in this whole episode, right? But that's the stealth mission that we are on. That's where the expansion of the risk factor goes multiple times, and that's where the gain comes out quicker. And the mindset in which we went is the same mindset: as you think, so you attract. And in a span of 15 months, Jasveer, we have completed the entire filming, right? Now we are getting into a post-production phase. We still are very far away from putting the narrative together. It's going to take us 1.5 years more to put the 30 episodes together. But the first part of the front end risk-taking ability has been crossed. Now, once that's been crossed, that's driven by our internal passion. Now it's the corporate element of this structure that starts coming in. The money required to, you have already invested certain things. Some people held your hand because they're expensive things. Now, how do you put the entire data into a documentary, right? And this is where the community's participation is required. This is where the other set of challenges come in. Every time your finances start going red, we depend only on the divine enablements. We are finding that there are some energies that come and actually hold our hand and take out from that red into the green again. And that's how we keep moving forward. So that's just a life's journey. It's never easy.
Right. And the other side of presence is absence. And I think creatives like yourself, you notice where the absence is when you were studying history, your philosophy, and you notice the absences. And then there's that desire to question, well, why are we absent here? We as Sikhs had a very strong presence in the Punjab on the Pakistan side before the partition, and now there is an absence. There's a growing absence, and there's that desire to question and to challenge why this absence. And we can talk about, you talk about the documentaries about Alexander the Great, etc., Marco Polo, and why is there an absence of documentaries about Guru Nanak, for example? And then it's our responsibility, if we feel the passion for it, to try and fill in those gaps.
Yeah, so Jasveer, I'll try and take that a bit differently, because since you're focusing on creativity aspect, I think the biggest ingredient of creativity is your internal aspect, right? Now, storytelling is founded on an opportunity that lies in the absence. Not even just storytelling, creation of a product. Story is a product, right? Be it any product. It lies in the void or in the absence of not having that thing, that someone comes in and creates it, whether it be a story or a product or anything, and a piece of art. And if it's something different, it gets accepted, right? But what is the internal journey of that absence of someone who's going through that quest to create it? I think I'll try and focus on that, because the absence within, I think, is the ingredient for catapulting someone into creating something meaningful. It starts from within. And I want to actually say this is that, Nanak says this very beautifully in one of his verses, right? And I think that has been a source of motivation for me in my quest, and I've rationalized it for myself, this internal absence. He says, Dukh Daru, Sukh Rog Bhaya, right? He says, Dukh Daru, basically unhappiness, becomes a medicine. Sukh rog, happiness becomes a disease. Right? Dukh daru sukh rog paya. It's an interesting polarities of happiness and unhappiness, void and filling of experiences. The void is a state of unhappiness. It's a deep unhappiness. We're not talking about physical unhappiness here. We're talking about the unhappiness which is within. And creativity springs from that state of not being in a status quo, the unhappiness. Now, I've always found that when internally you're dissatisfied, and that dissatisfaction goes to the pinnacle, of course, you have to have certain deep quest for something, and you're not able to achieve it. The answers are not coming, the roadblocks are all around you, and the dissatisfaction that starts emerging from within is the one which catapults you into finding an answer. So that state of unhappiness, which is actually a disease in the minds of most of the people in the worldly state, when they will simply say mentally he's disturbed or mentally he's going through some challenges, actually Nanak is saying that's the remedy. Because if you're passionate, from that remedy will emerge something that you will catch on to it and take it. And I want to actually talk about my experiences. Let's take about just the most recent experience. The gaps that I actually experienced within my each successive creative project. First book, and leaving the corporate world and getting into the making of the first book. I remember my phone stopped ringing. I left at a very senior level. No one would call me. I'm trying to go through the process of finding another job. 9 to 9, 24-hour job it was, right? Just flying around the world. Everything stopped. And that turmoil within was a state of unhappiness, a deep unhappiness, loss of purpose. And then within it came this desire, manifested from the years of work that you have done, that I want to go to Pakistan and experience. Which better time could it be than this time when I'm actually having the capacity to go there for a month or so, right? Once I get into the corporate world, it won't happen. That becomes a catalyst for your change and your projects and your direction changes in life. Now, between the first book and the second book, once you did the book with being very introverted. You went and experienced something in the physical world. You came back and you locked yourself away from the world. In 9 months, you wrote the entire narrative. You got it published. In 12 months, you were out with a book. And then starts a very extroverted journey, a very, very extroverted journey where there's a void in the world, and people are calling you from one place to the other place to the other place. In 12 months, I spoke at something like 75 odd seminars. Now that's a very extroverted place where your mind is not allowed to go inwards, right? And so this is a balance between the introversion and the extroversion. And you're doing that. Once you come back, you can't hold on to a book entire life, right? So when you come back, you decide that you have to leave this book. The moment you leave the book, your purpose, you stop accepting talks and external engagements. What happens is your mind goes down into a well, the creativity well of loss of purpose in life. And I experienced that between my first and second book. But I thank the divine that in 3 months, I found my next purpose because of certain reasons that emerged, which I can't explain now how they emerged, that enabled me to get back into Pakistan and start from this. So I was able to catapult back in 3 months' time. After my second book, this question about Guru Nanak's travels, it took me another 3 months to catapult back into a 3-year commitment. Now for 3 years, we are busy, right? But I've understood this cyclic emergence, it's a sine curve, very well, that I don't know right now what's going to happen to my state of my mind at the end of this current project, which will end in 2021. I believe that once you've done this, you will emerge from this introverted phase of creation now and take it into the world, and you will engage with the world for 1 year probably, and be a very extroverted environment. But the end of 2022, what will the mind go through? I don't know. And that's where once that stage of unhappiness starts emerging, unhappiness, or I would say more appropriate word is dissatisfaction, is like an empty bowl. It's an empty bowl which is begging. And begging in the creative space, I think, is the unknown factor. And the beggar who literally begs does not know that someone's going to put something inside that bowl. But that state of begging, you're begging not in front of any human being. You're begging in front of the divine to infuse the next purpose for you, and you don't know what that purpose is. And someone comes, that unexplainable energy comes and throws something inside and just vanishes. And that's what you pick up as your next passion and you start emerging. So that's what I've learned. So for me, the void that you're talking about is an ingredient to creativity.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think the void is very powerful, and I believe absence is very powerful. You talk about getting called, 75 different places where they call you because there isn't anybody more local to speak about whatever it is that they want you to speak about. So you're there filling the void. So void is an attractor. The beggar with the bowl. I think the Buddhists, there's great spirituality in creating that space with that begging bowl, when it's not just about, it's not about poverty, it's more about
No.
being receptive, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's a good point you're making. I realized, I mean, I was born in India. I came from a business class family. I've had these cyclic experiences in life from very young age. And I was born into a business family. I went into one of the most premium schools in India, the Doon School, which was believed to be the Eton of India. And of course, if an Eton of India will not be cheap to actually go into. So I went in there, but I lost my father in my first year of engineering, and everything went away. Everything went away. I was struggling for getting through my engineering degree. Didn't have the money to pay fees, right? Didn't have money to pursue higher education, right? So literally had to start from the bottom of the barrel at that stage. And as we were going through that, most of my luxurious aura of the Eton where I was of India, where I was studying, simply vanished. I was not able to be engaging in that society because there the societies of wealth. So you started from the very grassroots level and started moving up till you became a person of some worldly recognition in the corporate world. And then you walked away from that and you went down the tube. And then today, I don't engage with anyone in the corporate world. I don't engage with anyone. I have nothing. I've just cut my bridges. So sometimes it's good to cut your bridges and look forward and in the creative space, I've developed great experiences and great people all around me, but I'm going into the subsets of creativity up and down. So what I'm trying to say is that in this whole process is that one has realized that wealth is only means for your existence and survival, because it comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes, right? And in the process, when you will finally leave this world, you will not take a single dollar with you in your pocket. It's what you create. It's not, no one's going to remember me for what I did for 25 years in the corporate world. No one's going to remember me for my education. No one's going to remember me for where I was born, what my background is. If anyone's going to remember me, is not for my bank balance, but for what I will leave out here. So the point is, you will not take anything away. But this creation, the materialism, actually enchants us so much. And there's a beautiful verse in the Sikh scripture which says, I want to just give this as an example. Don't get me wrong. I just want to actually put things from the male-female perspective, so that people don't misinterpret this. In the Indic religions, the soul is always represented with a feminine aspect because it's longing for a marriage to the husband in that aspect, right? So there's a very high status given to the soul of every human being, male or female, which is always given a feminine energy. That's the pinnacle, right? However, what I'm going to talk about is there's another side to the same structure, right? And in the spiritual verse, it said, Maya Mamta Mohini, Bin Danta Jag Khaya. Right? What it means is the Maya is materialism, right? Maya dances like the beautiful angel Mohini, which is the goddess Mohini, which basically enchants the entire world. Maya Mamta Mohini, it enchants the entire world. It's you can't catch hold of it. And because you can't catch hold of it, it's unaccountable. And therefore it has the power to bin danta jag khaya. Even without the teeth, it is able to chew everything, as every aspect of the entire creation of all of us and of our existence. So that's the power in terms of feminine energy that we're also talking on the other end, not the feminine as we're talking about the male and female, but the same feminine energy which is given the pinnacle of the soul is also given the description of having the ability to enchant. And when it enchants us, even without teeth, it can eat all of us, right? So the bottom line, what's the learning? No one's going to take even single dollar with them, right? So what do you leave, what do you create is all that matters at the end of it.
Absolutely. So to sum up then, Amardeep, final thoughts?
Well, final thoughts are I appreciate you do this work. You give us an opportunity once in a year to share our thoughts. What would be challenging is that we spoke last year and or I think 2 years back, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, last year we spoke.
Last year. So what would be challenge is that if I have to keep up to Jasvir's expectations, then every year I need to come up with some new developments. Now that's going to be very challenging, right? So,
I'm sure it won't.
Let's see where this goes.
You develop all the time, Amardeep. Yeah, you're developing, you're evolving all the time, and that's the mark of a creative person. We're constantly learning, aren't we?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I hope it will be a year before we speak again. Hopefully we'll talk sooner than that.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.